It's time for my virtual Jericho with John Mayer.
Hello and welcome to another exercise in local electronic democracy. A week tomorrow, local elections, May the 6th. Polling stations are open from 7 in the morning till 10 at night. Now, today we're going to look at the local elections for Oxford City Council. Let's have a look at all the various wards that are being contested all over. There we are, a ward map of Oxford. We are in Carfax and Jericho, and we'll be discussing that and Walton Manor today. So those are all the wards within Oxford City Council being contested. You get 2 votes, so you can elect 2 councillors for each ward. Let's have a look at how the City Council looks at the moment. Today's City Council before the election. There are 34 Labour members, 9 Liberal Democrats, 2 Greens, and 3 Independents. So Labour has a pretty whopping majority. If we move on to the first ward we're going to look at, which is Carfax and Jericho, which last time around was called Jericho and Osney. Susanna Pressel got 65.9% of the vote. Louise Muddyman got for the Green got 24.9. James Morton for the Conservatives got 9.2. This time around, there's a plethora of candidates. Remember, you've got 2 votes for each ward. For Labour, you've got Alex Hollingsworth and Lizzie Diggins. Liberal Democrats, Juhi Kaur and Catherine Norman. For the Conservatives, Ben Hack and Frankie Wright. For the Greens, Charlotte Schofield and Sarah Edwards. And for the TUSC, Adam Powell Davis. At least 4 of those people will be appearing tonight to try and get you to vote for them. So that's your choice in Carfax and Jericho. First off, let's go to each candidate. By the way, gets 2 minutes, a strict 2 minutes, and then they have some questioning. Let's go first to the Green Party, and Sarah Edwards, over to you.
Thank you, John. Good evening, everybody. So just a very quick word about me. My background is in the voluntary sector. I've worked for local and national charities, mainly developing services and managing services. I've been campaigning on social justice and environmental issues most of my life. Now I'm retired, and I've retrained as a community mediator. So I help neighbours who are dealing with disputes. I'm also a trustee with Low Carbon Oxford North, which covers the northern part of Oxford, including Jericho. I've got an allotment at Cripley Meadow Allotments, and I run a little shop there. I'm on the committee, and one of my tasks is to provide a service to members so they can buy stuff for their plots. So while I'm standing, I want to see more Greens on the council. You can see from the graph that we now have 2 councillors that are Green, and we used to have several more. I want to continue the record of Greens have of promoting positive policies for the city. For example, affordable, secure housing, meeting much higher energy standards, support for services that provide a safety net for vulnerable people, such as the Oxford Homeless Project, transport solutions that result in cleaner and much safer streets.
30 seconds, Sarah.
Okay, more sustainable economy that respects the limits of the planet and creates new jobs, and at the same time cutting back on waste and pollution, and protecting green spaces for everybody to enjoy and for biodiversity to be restored. Above all, we want urgent action on the issues that underpin everything else, which is the climate emergency and the ecological crisis.
And I'm going to stop you.
Okay.
Sorry. Right, 2 local issues. Walton Street, the barrier. Tomorrow's a big day. What's your view on that?
Okay. Well, I'll be there tomorrow. I'm one of the speakers.
This is 30 others.
Sorry?
There are 30 speakers.
Yep, that shows the strength of feeling. I mean, it was a pretty ridiculous consultation, to be honest, that's just been had. Not only was it confusing, but people were consulted on an inadequate option of a few right turns, left turns, which people weren't happy with, having previously been promised that there would be a low traffic neighbourhood, a proper scheme that would stop through traffic. So people were offered this, and a lot of people said, no, we want better than that. But the way they've interpreted the results of the consultation is frankly a bit ludicrous. I mean, they've come out with the idea that nobody was happy, so we're just going to take the barrier away and do nothing. I mean, it's totally unacceptable. So yes, I'll be there tomorrow.
Ask you a follow-up question. Did the council actually promise a low traffic neighbourhood? That's not my recollection. I think you may be dreaming. Yeah,
Yvonne Constance, at the last time she sat taking a decision about the barrier, she was, if you remember, her officers had recommended at that point that the barrier be removed. And she overturned the recommendation, she ignored the recommendation, and she said, whatever happens with the bus gates, she accepted that something needs to be done about the transport situation in the neighbourhood. And she said, certainly the press release said that they were going to leave the barrier in place until they were ready to implement a low traffic neighbourhood scheme.
Moving on from that to the boatyard, what's your position on that?
Well, I think it's great that the boatyard has finally got to this stage. And I think I mentioned last week that I'm thrilled that we've actually got a boatyard aspect, because that was under threat years ago, and it was the Greens, alongside other members of the community, who fought to retain that facility. It would have been awful if we'd lost the actual boatyard, but it's been a real saga. Sorry?
Will it be built? Do you think we've only got another 20 seconds?
It's very hard to say, isn't it? I mean, I hope it goes ahead. Obviously, there are some unsatisfactory aspects to it. There's the issue of the bridge. There's the issue that, that there are a number of things that aren't brilliant. But I hope it goes ahead. I mean, it's been such a saga. If not, the council ought to compulsory purchase and take it forward itself.
Okay, thank you very much. I understand there was a meeting on Monday between various parties, so that may be moving it forward. Let's move on, if we can, to the Labour Party, which holds a seat at the moment. Alex Hollingsworth, why should people vote for you? Can we hear you?
Yeah, no, I'm unmuted now. Technology fails me again, or rather I fail and then blame the technology. I'm Alex Hollingsworth. I'm currently the City Councillor for the Carfax ward, which makes up half of the new Carfax and Jericho ward. So I represent already Walton Street, St John Street, Gloucester Green and much of the city centre. I've been a councillor on and off for 25 years, but more importantly, I've been a resident of Jericho for longer than that. I've moved 3 times, each time about 50 yards, because I like Jericho that much. My children were brought up here. The younger of the two is in her final year at the local secondary school. Both went to the primary school, so I'm very much part of the Jericho community. Like Sarah, I have an allotment at Cripley Meadow, and I've worked with Sarah very closely on the committee there for many years. I think it's a great success story there of what you can do if people work together to a common aim. As a councillor, my areas of interest, my priorities, I guess, been threefold. One, about homes, the delivery of more homes, but more importantly, genuinely affordable homes, so council homes. So let's not beat about the book and use euphemisms the government prefer. I want to see council homes built. That's the only genuinely affordable form of housing for a substantial majority of people in this city. And the
30
more
seconds,
that,
Alex.
the better. Second is transport. I was on the City Council and led on the pedestrianisation of Cool Market, the installation of the High Street bus gate. And finally, I guess culture. I'm a big fan of attending music venues, and we'll be doing so again once we're allowed to. And I'm pleased to say it was the policies that I wrote which ensured that the Wheat Sheaf recently had the planning application, well, essentially refused, pulled by the applicants. And it shows that as well as protest, which is important, it's actual practical solutions that get things done and stop bad things from happening.
Time's up, I'm afraid. I've got to be pretty brutal on this. Let me ask you a couple local questions. You can't talk about the boatyard because you're on the planning committee. But
no, that's not right. No, that's not why. Just to explain for everyone, I can't talk about the boatyard because I am speaking to you from literally my arm's width over there is the community centre, which is part of the planning application. So my house is immediately adjacent to it. So I have a conflict of interest, nothing to do with being on the planning committee. Any councillor in my position would have to back away from and not get involved in something like that. You know, I think we can all see from national politics today that probity matters, and I've always taken that view that I shouldn't express any views on something that's clearly affects my property. Okay,
let's move down Canal Street then to Mount Place. How would you like to see that developed? Would you like to see the CCTV camera come back there? Would you? What other things would you like to see happen there?
Well, I think CCTV cameras have a place, but much more effective in terms of making a place something that's used by the community is making it friendly for people to use. And I think that's what the transformation there has done. The Greening Jericho group have done a fantastic job, which people comment on every time I go through there. I was chatting to a couple of friends, neighbours from my street only yesterday. There, you know, people who were sitting there taking the sun. Shame it's now rainy, but you know, that's what drives away antisocial behaviour. It's making sure that it's a place for people to use, to gather, to talk, to you know, perform arts, to sell plants, to sell books, whatever it might be. That's the effective way of dealing with an antisocial behaviour problem, and it's already well on the way to doing that.
So are you going to put some of your ward money towards events in Mount Place, for example, for regular music, regular exercise classes?
Certainly as a ward councillor in Carfax, I have used my ward budget, which all councillors have access to support all sorts of things. So for example, I bought football shirts for the homeless football team that's based at O'Hanlon House, which is in my current ward. I think it's things like that, stuff that doesn't hit the radar largely, that you need to be doing things for your ward budget with, and it's those small things which make a genuine difference. And yes, events in Mount Place could well be one of those.
At Walton Street, tomorrow's the big day, D-Day. What's your view?
My view is the barrier should stay where it is until such time as there is a proper comprehensive scheme to reduce the amount of through traffic coming from the north, north of Jericho and coming through the city centre. I think that is probably best achieved with a camera-controlled bus gate in Worcester Street, the same as in the High Street. If it's camera-controlled, you can then let buses through, taxis, and with a bit of creativity and now blue badge holders, if that's what you want to do. But I think when we have got a constant stream of through traffic coming down the Woodstock Road, reopening Walton Street will simply mean we get the traffic jams back coming down Little Clarendon Street with the Rat Run, then down Walton Street, and that is an intolerable situation. Walton Street is transformed. It is now a pleasant place to be for walkers, for cyclists, but most importantly, my constituents, the people who elected me in the southern end of Walton Street, who have had their lives transformed literally by what has happened, and I fully support keeping the closure in place.
A short answer. What realistically do you expect the decision to be tomorrow?
I have given up trying to predict what Councillor Constance will do. I hope she'll do the right thing.
All right, thanks, Alex. You can come back later on. Now to the Liberal Democrats, and I hope I pronounce this right. Yuhi Kaur is a Liberal Democrat candidate for Carfax and Jericho. Yuhi, why should we elect you?
Good evening, I'm Juhi Kore, and I'm standing in the upcoming 6th of May election to the Oxford City Council as a Liberal Democrat. If elected, my top 3 priorities will be collaboration, climate action, and active transportation. Collaboration is key to effective governance, and I would ensure local residents are thoroughly consulted. I support the principles behind low traffic neighborhoods, and I would, subject to a well-run consultation, showing sufficient support in the community, like to see one in Jericho. I will work alongside our county colleagues as well as members of other parties to deliver local solutions to our affordable housing crisis and income inequality problems. The climate crisis is an urgent one, and I will work tirelessly to improve Oxford's recycling rates and increase investments in green infrastructure, including sufficient space for pedestrians, zero carbon public transit, and 15-minute neighborhoods. While transportation is a county council issue, I believe we need to both be reducing our carbon emissions and improving the quality of our air. I will advocate diligently for better protective measures for our cyclists so our city can truly live up to its ideal of a cycling city. Other issues I feel strongly about include supporting local businesses and engaging the student community in local community programs. I love our city very much, and I'm standing because I know with my passion and my experience, we can start delivering on issues that have sometimes been ignored in the past. Hence, I'm asking that you vote for me and the Liberal Democrats this May so we can build a world-class city for everyone together.
Thank you, and even within time. Now, you're a student at St Anthony's, correct?
I am, yes.
You're here today, gone tomorrow. Why should we elect you?
The biggest reason being the new immigration rules in the UK allow international students to live and work in the country for 2 years without any requirement for sponsorship. So I've already committed to living in Oxford for at least the next 2 years, hopefully the foreseeable future, because I don't think I'm done with Oxford or the university just yet.
So local issues, where do you stand on the boatyard?
I think I agree with the comments that have made previously. I think it's great that we do have a boatyard, and I think with continued consultation, we should also try and build better infrastructure in the boatyard.
And on Walton Street, what's your position on that?
That's probably the most contentious for whenever we're out knocking on doors. That's the one we get the most, and I think I broadly agree with having that street closed. I do think that one of the biggest frustrations, including someone that I was talking to, she lives on one of the side streets in Jericho, and she has to go all the way, to the Ring Road, to Botley, and then go to the train station every morning. And that's really, really inefficient for a lot of people, and especially for people that, they're not driving, they have to be driven by someone else. So I think that we definitely can find a more efficient way for people to get around, but by and large, I do support the closure of the Walton Street.
I think the person you spoke to on the doorstep was probably telling you porky pies. To get to the station, you go up to St Bernard's Road, turn right, and down the Woodstock Road. You don't have to go up to the Ring Road.
Oh.
It wasn't true, what they were telling you. However, so why you rather than the Greens or indeed Labour? What are you offering that's different to them?
I am very, very against saying what other people aren't doing. I think what matters most is what I stand for, and I think I really admire and respect a lot of the other people, not just on this call right now, but people that are in council from other parties. I think the reason that I personally support the Liberal Democrats and why I'm standing as a Liberal Democrat is because of just more general value-based things. I think I support just on a value basis, the Liberal Democrats.
But you're not the first candidate. There was a previous Liberal Democrat candidate who dropped out.
Sorry?
How does that make you feel that you weren't the sort of first choice?
Well, I wasn't looking to run at the time, so it wasn't that I wasn't selected or something like that, or that someone else was selected instead. It was just a timing thing. And, this election isn't supposed to have been this year. It was supposed to have been last year. And a lot of people that were standing in election last year, they had circumstances change quite drastically for some of them with family or health. And that's one of the big reasons why we've had so much reshuffling of candidates.
Okay, time's up. Let's move on to the last candidate who's here today. Hello, today, Adam Powell-Davies, Trade Union and Socialist Coalition. Adam, you're coming a bit from the left. Can you tell us why should people in Jericho vote for you?
Yeah, thanks, John. And yeah, thank you very much for having me. My name is Adam Powell Davis, and I'm standing as councillor for the Trade Unionist and Socialist Coalition, or TUSC. I'm a fourth-year undergraduate at the University of Oxford, and I study Japanese studies. So I've spent much of my university life in and around the Oriental Institute on Pusey Lane, just behind the Ashmolean. And so the Trade Unionist Socialist Coalition was set up in 2010 with the primary goal of enabling trade unionists, community campaigners, and socialists to stand in elections under a common anti-austerity banner. And so as a TUSC candidate, I am standing on a strictly zero austerity, no cuts programme. Over the past decade, funding from central government has decreased in virtually all local authorities, and this trend will no doubt continue into the coming period, with the Tory government looking to make ordinary people pay for their grossly mismanaged coronavirus crisis, just as they did following the financial crash in 2008. Unfortunately, councils, including all councils where Labour is in power, like Oxford, have uniformly passed on Tory central government cuts to differing extents. TUSC refuses to support cuts to council jobs, services, pay and conditions. We think the best way to mobilise the mass campaign that is necessary to defeat the dismantling of council services is to firstly, as a community, democratically set a budget that meets the needs of local people, and to then demand that central government funding makes up the shortfall. I'm standing as an alternative to, thank you, John. I'm standing as an alternative to business as usual austerity. And if elected, I would be a local representative supporting and campaigning alongside workers and students. With the current rightwards trajectory of the Labour Party under Keir Starmer in particular, I believe that now is the time to launch a youth and workers fight back from the grassroots. So if you are interested in what you've heard, please do get in touch. And let's try and build together a new mass party for the 99%. Thank you.
Now, Adam, you actually live in Kendal in Cumbria, don't you? That's your registered address.
Yes,
what have you got
right.
to do with Jericho?
So I've been an undergraduate here for 4 years now, sort of mainly based in Jericho and also just slightly north in the Nissan Institute for Japanese Studies on Winchester Road. And I'm also, like Juhi, planning to stay in Oxford in the future, applying for a master's in Japanese studies with a view to do a DPhil in early modern Japanese literature. So I'll also be sticking around.
But you're just a Corbynista in different clothes, aren't you?
Well, I suppose what's wrong with being a Corbynista? I thought he had some absolutely brilliant ideas that appealed to a new wave of young people and a new wave of voters in general. And he offered something that at least I have never seen in my lifetime within sort of the existing political establishment. So I have no shame in sort of aligning myself with the views of Jeremy Corbyn. I thought they were very good views and strictly anti-austerity, which is what I'm championing in these elections.
The worst Labour result for 33 years in December 2019. So obviously the British people didn't like them. I
think in terms of numbers, in terms of sort of the number of voters that voted for Labour, it was one of the highest votes in absolute terms since the early 2000s, I believe. But
it's the lowest number of Labour MPs for a long, long time, lowest general election vote for 33 years. So Corbynistas didn't succeed nationally. Why should they succeed in Jericho?
Well, I suppose that what you had within the Labour Party was sort of a anti-Corbyn element, sort of surfacing, making conditions as difficult as possible for Jeremy Corbyn to really sort of put his programme across.
All right, let's move away from national politics. Where do you stand on Walton Street?
I would support the removal of the barrier. I don't think that the barrier should have been erected in the first place, and then the LTN sort of 18-month trial period extended without proper community-led consultation first. But if the barrier was removed, I don't think it's a question of just taking it away and not doing anything. And we should look at introducing a sort of democratically controlled public bus service run under the control of service users and workers, and the council that could reduce cars in the area.
Okay, good luck, Adam. All right, as always in these things, there is some Tory candidates. There are two Tory candidates, in fact, this time round. They are Ben Hack and Frankie Wright. There they are, the plain blue chair. The Tories didn't want to take part in this, nor did they want to take part last week, according to one of their candidates, because he didn't like my form of questioning. Well, any questions you'd like to ask the Tories, ask them now. Okay, let's move on if we can. You've now got about 5-6 minutes to ask each other questions. Fire away. Who would like to go first? Nobody? Nobody wants to ask anybody else a question? No? Alex, do you not want to ask the TUSC person the question?
Nothing personal, Adam, but no, not really. I'm happy to answer questions that you put to me, and so on. I don't think it's our role as candidates to cross question each other. I think Juhi said it right. We stand on what we believe, not on any digs we can make at each other. I'm delighted to see two students. I'm delighted to see two allotmenteers, one of which is me. Those are groups which are critically important to our city, and yeah.
Three.
So that's it.
3 allotmenteers, Alex.
Oh,
3.
Another one.
Oh right, yeah. I didn't think you were in the programme yet, Carol.
Yes, she is next. She is next.
Right,
Okay. 3 allotmenteers. Anybody else? Come on, this is a marketplace of ideas. Anybody else want to ask any other candidate a question? No? Gosh.
Yes,
Oh, well.
I'm trying to.
Yes, Sarah, fire away.
I'd just like to ask Alex about Westgate. The Greens weren't very happy with the prospect of a giant new shopping centre. And obviously there's been an unexpected turn of events. No one could have predicted with the pandemic. But the Westgate has brought quite a few problems in its wake, including a huge extra traffic situation, because it was designed to draw people in over a very large area. And I just wondered if, given where we're at now, what his thoughts are about Westgate as a phenomenon.
Alex,
Yeah, yeah, very, very happy to answer that. I think, first of all, just to correct one critical fact, it is often said that the Westgate car park is extra parking. It's actually considerably smaller than the car parks that were there before. People have forgotten that. Yes, there are more shops, but those people who are travelling, many of them until the pandemic, by bus and by train and using the park and ride to those shops, were getting into their cars in Oxford and then driving to Milton Keynes or to Wickham or to Cheltenham or even to London. So what we actually have, I think, is something that serves a local need that was not being met before. Yes, there will be shifts of businesses around, but that's been exacerbated by the pandemic. And I think actually things like Debenhams and Boswell's, that actually dates back to long before Westgate and long before the pandemic. They've been essentially bankrupt trading for the last 10, 15 years since the financial crash. Those businesses going, I think, actually throws up a whole set of opportunities for landlords in Oxford city centre as it does across the piece. Instead of having dying department stores, we've now got the opportunities for new and innovative uses. Could be independent retailers coming in, as there used to be. George Street was independent retailers all the way down when I first moved to Oxford. That opportunity exists again. The demand for lab space, and by lab I don't necessarily mean the white coats and test tubes laboratory, but that seems to be the phrase for kind of interactive office space, spin outs off the university, is huge. And so there's all sorts of opportunities. So no, I am fine with the Westgate. I think it's been good. I think there are issues around its traffic generation which still need to be addressed, and we need to intercept more of that traffic and get it into the park and rides. yeah, the notion that not providing shops and having people drive to Cheltenham from Oxford or Milton Keynes from Oxford is better, I think, is mistaken.
A question to all of you: How do we get Jericho to bounce back after COVID? Jericho, Walton Street, the whole lot. What measures would you propose? Alex, go on. Yes, hands up. You go first, Alex.
Well, I think the thing that will help Jericho businesses bounce back, and by that I mean Little Clarendon Street and Walton Street, I think it's promotion. It's always promotion, and that's something that the businesses, the council, the community all need to work together on. I think it's encouraging the community to use the businesses. I was delivering leaflets in Jackson Street today, and I found it profoundly depressing that I passed half a dozen, I'm going to give them some free advertising, Able and Coal boxes sitting on people's doorsteps, selling the very same things that can be bought in shops like Manos and the Branca Delicatessen, literally seconds of walk away, and they're being delivered. So I think there's a job of work for us all to do to promote those. And I would keep the cars out of as much of Little Clarendon Street and Walton Street as possible, because you can see during the pandemic, the shops that have thrived, you know, like the hairdresser turned coffee shop, which is, you know, got a huge market for coffees for cyclists and so on and so on. You know, people on foot and on bikes stop and buy things in a way that people in cars do not. And I think that's how we go about promoting businesses in Jericho.
So, would you support a move to pedestrianise Little Clarendon Street at night, so it becomes cafe culture there, just after 6:30 maybe?
If that was addressed to me, yes, I have always supported that. I find it inexplicable that some businesses have opposed it. I hope they will change their minds.
So it could be that could become a thriving part of nighttime Oxford culture, cafe culture. Yes. Any other candidates got any ideas to help Jericho bounce back? Yes, Yuhi.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. I think something that we have in Oxford that has done a really is doing some really exciting work is Makespace, which is in just outside of our ward, but it's such a great example for how small businesses and especially startups and people that want to just, you know, try out some business ideas or sustainable projects can come together and work together.
Sarah, any ideas from you as to how to get Jericho to bounce back?
Yeah, I mean, Ju has made a very important point, and that's one of my pet projects as well. And going back to this thing about retail, I think, I mean, we've obviously got a number of closed units currently in the street. What we really need to be moving towards is one of the things that Julia mentioned, which is a circular economy. And, you know, if we were able to have, you know, places you could go to get stuff fixed, that, you know, where you can get equipment or tools or whatever repaired. And, you know, so we're not, I mean, in the past, we tend to see charity shops, for example, as the sort of poor relation on a high street. Well, actually, I think people are waking up to the fact that charity shops have got an incredibly important role because they're part of this circular economy that we need to be moving towards. So I think we need to stop, you know, and going back to what Alex was saying, I mean, retail has its limits, and we need a different approach for a more sustainable economy.
I'm going to ask a question which I bet none of you answer. What are your canvas returns showing you? Anybody willing to share their canvas returns? Door-to-door canvas returns? Silence is golden. All right,
Yeah.
Let's go. Go on. Alex, you can speak? No?
Yeah, you're right. I'm absolutely not sharing those because that would be a breach of the Data Protection Act. I would say that myself and my fellow candidate have spoken to more than half of the people in Jericho, and it's been a very interesting and useful experience.
Fine, thank you. Right, tomorrow is another interesting experience. At 10 o'clock, Councillor Constance is holding her meeting to decide what to do about Walton Street. Her officials have said, open it up, let it rip like it was 2 years ago. She's going to have 30 people, yes, 30 people going to present to her reasons why that should or should not happen. you can join us live at 9:55, probably 9:45 to see that. We're going to have some of the major players in it who are going to say what they're expecting, and afterwards to either cry into their beer or celebrate. So that'll be probably going on for 2 hours from tomorrow at 9:45. Please join us. You just go to the My Virtual Jericho website. This is an exercise in democracy, your chance to go to the county council. And even more, next Wednesday at 5:30, there's a session called What's the Point of Ofcom? Who are the regulators for television and telecoms? It's yet another John Muir book. It's the 40th John Muir book. That'll be next Wednesday at 5:30 with some stars of TV, radio, and broadcasting. Please drop in on that. It may seem obtuse, but please do. And on the 12th of May, though we don't have a caption for it, I'm going to invite the winners from the various elections to come back and say, well, we won. What are we going to do now? Let's move on to the second ward, which is now called Walton Manor. So it's now called result last time. Let's have a look at what the result was last time. So Louise Upton, you got 48.8% of the vote. Ruby Ziegler got 40.6. Alexander Curtis got 9.2. So it was a Labour win, but not a huge Labour win. Let's have a look at who's standing this time round. For Labour, Louise Upton and James Fry, indefatigable James Fry. For Liberal Democrats, James Cox and Caroline Turner, Carol with an E. For the Conservatives, Maddie Ross and David Pope. Let's first of all see Liberal Democrats. Caroline Turner, why should the people of Walton Manor vote for you?
Well, hi there, I'm Caroline Turner, and I moved to Walton Manor 9 years ago with my then 3 very young children, having been located in Europe for the previous 15 years. So during the whole time, the City Council has been Labour, and I have observed very little improvement in this area and arguably some notable deterioration. For example, measures to manage motorised traffic, which you've just been talking about, they need to work in parallel with improvements in active travel and public transportation infrastructure. The City Council seems to have had no cohesive approach during particularly the last 5 years. Residents in our city centre location having to walk over a mile to get to a bus stop is really not acceptable. So, basically the residents in the west of Walton Manor, we really need a bus. We're supposed to be the English cycling capital, yet Walton Manor's 2 cycling routes, one has been compromised with traffic priority, Route 51, and one is basically no longer considered safe, which is Route 5 and has a warning on it. We deserve basic infrastructure to protect our cyclists and our pedestrians. Some residents do need to use a car, and I fundamentally believe that this is totally separate from the size of dwelling that they live in and whether that dwelling has a drive or not. It appears that the 2 Labour councillors both support last week severe reduction in on-street residential parking. Clearly, they don't live in terraced houses in the ward. So I believe that we need to address the needs for using our cars prior to restricting car ownership to those residents who simply own drives. For me, Port Meadow is an asset for all of the residents to use. For me, Burgess Field is a nature reserve that needs total 100% protection. I believe that prevention of certain activities on Port Meadow, which supposedly disturb the land, such as football via a PSPO, ignores the vital role of this public space. Thank you very much for your time. The history of me is basically I'm a Cambridge graduate, and I hope that you will consider voting for change in the City Council on May the 6th. And please vote for the Lib Dems.
Right. Thanks very much, Carol. Now, buses. It's the chimera. There have been 3 attempts at buses in this area. 3 have failed. Why are you people still dreaming of a bus service?
Because we need to have a bus service. We need to have a bus service for the people that live down at the bottom of Jericho. We also need to have a bus service that interconnects. And actually, if you talk to the bus companies, they believe that a bus service would be profitable provided the barrier is removed at the bottom of Walton Street. However, there is a great deal of traffic restriction and low traffic control within Walton Street and Kingston Street, and provided the bus goes all the way up to the JR. because a majority of people that are over the age of 55 have to go to the JR at least twice a year. Taxi fares are £10, well, £8 to £10, depending where you live in either Jericho or Walton Manor each way.
So why have they failed, Carol?
Previously, they failed because there was issues of congestion, because there was very little control. There was issues of a lack of integration in terms of the fact that the buses apparently left 10 minutes before some major trains would be arriving from London and from Reading. And also the fact that they used to go up to Cutslow.
But didn't they fail because there was no demand?
No, there was quite a lot of demand.
That wasn't my
They just
experience.
they weren't going to the right places. That's what I'm saying. If they just go up to Cutslow from the station, apparently you need to have 5 profitable seats on each journey on an average to make it profitable.
Let's move on to the Walton Street question. The people of St Bernard's Road say they've been under siege for 18 months, 2 years. How are you going to help them?
Well, it's very interesting that Alex said that he's very happy with the location of the barrier at the end of Walton Street, because it's very good for Walton Street. The whole point of an LTN is that you do not direct traffic down narrow residential streets. And I think the residents of Leckford Street, Observatory Street, and St Bernard's would actually claim to be narrow residential streets. They're actually half the size of Walton Street at the bottom, and they have received increased traffic flow because of the location of the barrier right at the end of Walton Street. I'm fully in favour of an LTN if due process had been followed, but unfortunately in the implementation of this LTN, due process was not followed at all.
So you don't think there's an LTN? Do you think the council's let you down? The county council let you down?
I think the county council and the council have let us down, but I think mainly the county council. I think that actually there's a lot. You can have an LTN. There are 2 LTNs in Germany that have no street blockages, and that would have been far more appropriate here, so that the traffic is not diverted around St Barnabas School or extra traffic up to St Aloysius School or down side roads that cannot cope with it. We should have had low traffic line. Nobody wants cut through traffic, absolutely nobody, not the traders, none of the residents. We should have better bike paths, we should have better alternative transportation, and we need to slow the traffic right down so that people don't use it as a cut through. If it takes 10 minutes longer to come along Walton Street and Kingston Road, you're not going to use it as a cut through.
Do you not think that there was an element of NIMBYism about the plans for pedestrianisation and so on in Walton Street? And in fact, maybe you overreached yourselves on that.
I wasn't part of the full pedestrianisation of Walton Street, in no way.
No, but is there not an element of NIMBYism from people in Walton Manor about Walton Street? They'd actually like to see less traffic coming their way.
I think that there perhaps is in either party, and the problem is that neither solution is 100% good for Walton Manor or 100% for Jericho, but actually the division between Jericho and Walton Manor is not a clear-cut division. Alex was talking about Manos, that's Walton Manor. Alice was talking about Branca, that's Walton Manor, it's not Jericho. So I think this division that everybody's saying, we need to get to a solution that is perhaps 70% beneficial to everybody, stops the cut-through traffic and lowers the pollution.
Okay, why are the Greens not standing in Walton Manor?
Because they're very nicely supporting us, because during various elections, Lib Dems and Greens have stood together, whereas in various elections, Conservatives and Labour have stood together. So very nicely, they're supporting us. And as a reciprocal, we have actually stood down in other areas.
So you've log rolled. You've done a backstairs deal with them to stand down one place.
I think you can call it whatever you want in negative terminology. It means that the Greens want us to win this seat.
Okay, right. Moving on, please, if we can, to Labour. The current holder for Labour is Councillor Louise Upton, who is the cycling czar for the council. Louise, why should people vote for you again?
Hello, John. Thank you for having me on. So just to let you know, people know something about me. I'm a neuroscientist at Oxford University. It's my day job. I've been the councillor here since 2013. The reason I ran to be a city councillor, really, it was my mother who was a councillor in rural Shropshire where I grew up. And she made me see how important it is that local government is done well, especially for the less well off. It's really important, if, you know, that your council house gets fixed, that your local playground is nice. So I'd always thought it was something I would do at some time, perhaps when I retire. But when I got cancer for a second time in 2012, I thought, right, well, I need to get on with this, better get on with it. And I ran for the council then, and I've been the councillor for Walton Manor ever since. For most of that time, I've been the champion for cycling as well, because, well, for so many reasons, we need more people to be cycling. And for the last 2 years, I've been the cabinet member for Safer Healthy Oxford. I've reduced my hours at work down to 50% in order to give this the time that it needs. There are really, I see, two quite separate parts to being a city councillor. The first is about standing up for your ward, doing things for your residents. And the second, of course, is about making Oxford as the city run well for everybody, for everyone. So if I take those two bits separately, as a ward councillor, I think the first thing I did when I got elected was get the canal towpath resurfaced. Since then, I've helped plant pyrocanthus up against the walls that get graffitied. It's doing things, helping people negotiate the planning system. It's about putting some bike parking in on North Parade. It's about when the 90-year-old residents can't get her landlord to install an automatic door. It's about championing her through social services to get it done. But then, of course, there's all the citywide things that we do as well. And I'm so proud of the many things that we've done citywide, very entrepreneurial. We've set up this company, Direct Services, to actually bid for work. We're building lots of much needed council housing, regulating the housing rental sector, rolling out the Oxford.
About another 30.
Oh, another 30.
Thank
you. And of course we are incredibly green. Carol, you shattered my illusions. I thought the Greens had stood down because I'd worked so well with them. Because we are putting in, we put in the country's largest solar carport. We've got the biggest battery in the country coming, which will enable us to transfer our fleet, our bin lorries and things over to being electric. We are. I think I've worked very well with Green.
I'm just going to stop you there, Louise. Now, let me ask you some questions. Do you support the pedestrianisation of Little Clarendon Street at night? So turn it into a more cafe culture?
Wouldn't that be just delightful? I'd love to see that happen. Yeah.
How are we going to make it happen?
Well, we've had a couple of successful evenings, haven't we, when we have had it pedestrianised. So I think the most important thing probably is to vote Labour for the county council as well, so that we can work more constructively with them. But I think it is possible. As you said, John, I think we've had a lot of conversations about having festivals that allow, which would spill out, say, from Little Clarendon Street down Walton Street, having that temporarily pedestrianised as well. So I'd very happily work with anybody who wants to get that done. Good.
Now let's talk about the closure of Walton Street. It has become a cycling paradise, but just to be contrary, it's become a bit of a racetrack, hasn't it, for cyclists?
Oh, well, I haven't seen that happen as an issue. I mean, people, I don't suppose they go faster than the cars used to. And isn't that great that we can get, cyclists can get around speedily? The whole point of a lot of the traffic measures we're going to try and put in place is that we make it easier, more convenient, faster to go on your bicycle than to go in a car. I mean, I already find that. I don't have a car, I cycle everywhere in Oxford.
So what's your position on tomorrow's meeting, if you had a vote?
Oh, gosh, well, what I would like, obviously, is for there to have been a proper, well-designed, low-traffic neighbourhood that does all the things that we want in terms of stopping cars going along residential streets. And I mean, since I've been a councillor, I've had complaints about rat runners coming down Kingston Road down into Walton Street. So something that's got to stop that. Just removing the barrier, that doesn't please anybody. I can't quite believe Yvonne Constance would even do that. The very limited measures that they've suggested, well, that's better than nothing.
They're not suggesting anything. They're just suggesting removing the barrier. No measures at all.
Sorry, yes, the ones that the officers suggested a month ago that were just a couple of no right turns. Yeah, which would at least help. I mean, poor old St Bernard's Road, poor old Letford Road, they've really suffered from having a lot of extra traffic go down them. So any solution has got to share out the traffic more equally. I would favour seeing something like, a bollard roughly outside Walton Street Cycles, which would completely stop rat running going down there, but would make sure that all the traffic from Jericho sort of exited southward, whereas the traffic from Waterside would exit northward, and that would just share out the traffic more fairly.
Now, you're a prominent supporter of the LTN Jericho group. NIMBYism? Was it pure NIMBYism?
I'm not quite sure what bit of what they're not wanting in their backyard. I mean, of course they don't want other people rat running past their doors who should be going down St Giles, but wanting to have the street you live on be pleasant, that you be able to wander along it with your children and on the bicycle. I think that's sort of just what everybody wants. And I think you have to remember, of course, that low traffic neighbourhoods, they have many pros, but they do have some cons for the residents that live on them. For them, it is going to be slightly more inconvenient to go to some of the places they want to go. So, the people have obviously weighed up these pros and cons and decided that actually we're happy to sacrifice a bit of direct routes for ourselves in exchange for having a pleasanter environment to live in.
But did you go down a cul-de-sac suggesting pedestrianising part of Walton Street, when that was deeply unpopular? Should you have been sort of more realistic about all of this?
About pedestrianising part of Walton Street? Well, in lots of beautiful European cities, they have large areas pedestrianised, and it works. They make it work. And I think it's a crying shame that we don't have, larger bits of Oxford pedestrianised. And one of the things that we're looking at the moment is the end of Broad Street, getting that into being a pedestrianised space rather than a car park. So you can. I think there could have been ways to do it. It would have been lovely. I appreciate. I'm not a traffic engineer. We need somebody to design, and that's what the Jericho low traffic neighbourhood did: get a professional to design a good system, a good low traffic neighbourhood.
Which cost £670,000, Louise.
I'm sure we could have done it for an awful lot cheaper than that. I mean, if you go to Waltham Forest, which I did a couple of years ago to look at how they've done theirs, you can do a lot of things just with planters and closing things off. Obviously, over time you can make it more beautiful, but it doesn't have to cost £670,000. And businesses, coming back to Waltham Forest, that really showed how it's good for businesses. As Alex mentioned, people who are walking and cycling stop and go into shops. People who are going through in cars don't. And I think in Waltham Forest, they found actually that the resistance from businesses often to the low traffic neighbourhood was because the people that owned the businesses actually wanted to be able to park outside, rather than it actually being their customers who were coming by car.
True in Jericho as well. Let's move on, if we can, to the Tories. You can come back and ask questions of each other. So there are two Tory candidates in this election in Walton Manor. Neither of them are here tonight. There they are, blue chair. Any questions you'd like to ask Maddie or David? I'd contact them via the Conservative website. I think it's pretty disgusting that Tories can't shop for things like this, but it's a free country. Let's move on if we can. So remember, the vote is next Thursday. Polling stations are open from 7 until 10. Find out where your local polling station is and turn up and vote. You just need a polling card. Louise and Carol, any questions you'd like to ask each other?
Yes, John, Louise. Could I just ask? Yes, I was wondering whether Caroline has considered running for the county, because they are the ones who are in control of a lot of the transport issues and the buses. So there isn't really, a lot of these things are out of the control of the city council. And thinking about the bus services, particularly the deregulated bus services, you know, the reason that the pick-me-up service, which was wonderful and a lot of people in the ward used to use, had to stop, was because it was hemorrhaging, I think, across the city.
It stopped because of the barrier on Walton Street, according to what they said.
But
before
did it stop citywide because of that? Citywide it stopped because it was losing money.
Yeah, but initially it stopped first of all in Jericho and Walton Manor because of the barrier, and then it stopped because it was using money. That's what they claim. They've actually got a website.
Are you standing for the wrong election, Carol?
No, I don't believe so. We've got a very good candidate for the Lib Dems, who's the incumbent county councillor in John Howson, who has a very good approach to LTMs and is fully in support of a bus route for Jericho and Walton Manor. And I do think that actually living in the ward makes a very big difference in terms of how you feel about the ward. And I want to make the environment that I live in really much better than it is at the moment, just with little tiny things that show that you care. And I do agree, you've done some fantastic things in terms of the bike path in Marston, but the fact that our bike paths haven't been protected, whether it's city or council, I think that we need to be looking at these things. And in terms of city planning, you know, how can Labour possibly explain that they're green when they put up the Castle Mill developments? You know, that was all Labour. And I just think,
Louise, guilty.
I've got to come in on that. Castle Mill developments, those were built by the university. Okay, they went through a planning committee, which are non-political, and if you try to claim anything about them being political, that would be fairly libelous. And Labour, Lib Dem, and Green councillors on that planning committee all voted for those. That is not a political action at all. Something on
when they broke the planning rules, who was it that then didn't ask them to take the extra layer off because they built them too high? Who did not request that they complied with the planning legislation?
Carol, I'm terribly sorry that they didn't break any rules. They got planning permission for those. I quite agree. It's a shame they did. I wish they had been a story lower, but those were the plans that went to the planning committee that were approved. And I chaired the later planning committee where we were forcing them to make amends to them to try and make them look better. And I like you, I wish they had been a story lower. I wish that perhaps if the artist representations that all of those councillors who saw were rendered better, than they might have turned them down at the time, but they didn't.
And the renditions that have been done are all on the side of the railway. They're not on the side. We've got trees that will never grow tall enough along the side of Pripley Meadow, Alex Hollingworth's allotments. We've got the trees planted there that will never be growing tall enough because they haven't got a big enough root base. And I'm not a particularly good gardener, Sarah can tell you that. But honestly, all of the work that's been done to rectify the eyesore amount is all on the railway side of it, which is great. The greening of it is brilliant, but actually nothing has been done on the other side from Port Meadow. And I think if you look at any environmental impact assessment, it would come out very negative.
So we run out of time, but so Louise, you had the wool pulled over your eyes.
Well, the people who sat on that planning committee, I guess, did. Just very briefly, apparently the subsidy needed for Jericho bus service would be about £70,000 a year. That's from the bus companies, so that would be very different.
That's if it finishes in Summertown. The difference is the lucrative section is going up to the JR because parking up at the JR is quite expensive. So people would actually prefer to go to their appointments on the bus. Now, I'm not saying that they definitely would, but the logic is that they would. And therefore, if you're doing any kind of marketing analysis on it, financially, it would make sense so long as it turns around and comes back up at the JR.
Do make your pitch to the bus companies on that.
The political discourse is what it's all about. It's about competing ideas. How's canvassing going? Any of you prepared to share your canvassing results with us? Either of you?
No. I don't think that's right.
No, all
No,
right.
I mean, it's, James Fry and I have a award surgery, if you like, on the second and fourth Saturdays of every month at North Parade. So we get to see people all the time, all the year, and hear their problems. But it's always, having not been able to knock on doors for a year, it is really nice to get back out and talk to people and hear what their issues are, because so many people have little niggles and things that they don't ever have the time to email you about, but if you actually go and knock on the door and ask, they're delighted to be able to tell you. So I'm enjoying doing that again.
Okay.
Yeah, it is actually really nice to be back out on the streets. But just a straw poll, Labour have got more larger signs out, but we've got more smaller window signs out. So I'd say it's quite good for both of us.
Very good. All right, thank you both. And now, so you can vote next Thursday between 7 and 10. Find your local polling station. It's your democratic duty. Remember, people died for your right to vote. Tomorrow, you might die after the meeting. So join me and others tomorrow for D-Day for Walton Street, which will be live from the County Council. Join early at 9:45, 9:55 for the pre-show. Then you have the Yvonne Constant show for an hour and probably an hour and a half at the moment, and then afterwards we'll have reaction from some of the people and whether they're good or bad. And next Wednesday it will be another My Jericho. What's the point of Ofcom? And also now for the appeal. These things cost money, so if you feel that you want to carry on with this little series, do throw a little bit of money my way to pay for internet links, for MailChimp and things like that. The address comes up at the end, but here's the address: Lloyds Bank, and that's the sort code. Any money is welcome, and I make not a penny from this. Before anybody wants to say anything about that. Meanwhile, thank you very much, and see you all tomorrow morning. Goodbye.
Yoo-hoo!